Preacher rescued battered woman from blizzard. Marries her when she says his name. The wind howled like a living thing across the small mountain town of Pinecrest. Snow fell in thick, heavy sheets, blanketing the streets and roofs in a pure, suffocating white. The few streetlights that were still working flickered against the swirling snow, casting ghostly shadows on the frozen ground. Most of the townspeople were huddled inside their homes, sitting by the fireplace or under thick blankets, listening to the storm's fury outside. But not everyone was safe. Clara Thompson wrapped her thin coat tighter around her body and peered through the frost-covered window. She could hear the wind rattle the old wooden shutters, and she shivered. It wasn't only the cold that made her anxious. Inside her home, she felt trapped, as if the walls themselves were closing in on her. She had been living with her husband for several years, and lately things had grown unbearable. Arguments, harsh words, and constant tension had made the house feel like a cage. She had tried to leave before, but every attempt was blocked or ignored. Today, though, she decided she couldn't stay any longer. Clara took a deep breath, her heart pounding, and opened the front door. The storm hit her immediately, biting at her cheeks and making her eyes water. The snow was already deep on the ground, and each step forward felt heavier than the last. She stumbled through the drifts, trying to remember the path to the main road where she hoped someone might help her. The wind roared, and the world around her seemed to disappear in a blinding white. She could barely see a few feet ahead. Her fingers grew numb and her legs ached, but she forced herself onward. She knew she couldn't turn back. Inside her home, her husband had been asleep, unaware of her escape. Clara didn't dare look back. Every snow-laden tree, every shadowed corner seemed like a threat. She kept going, driven by a mix of fear and hope. Hours ago, the storm had begun, and it had grown stronger as the night wore on. The roads were treacherous, and the few cars that dared venture out were already stuck or sliding on icy patches. Clara realized she had to find shelter soon, or she would freeze completely. She spotted a small path leading through the trees. It wasn't familiar, but it seemed like it might lead to the main road. Clara clutched her coat tightly and trudged forward, her feet sinking deep into the snow with each step. The wind was relentless, and her hair whipped across her face, freezing against her cheeks. She thought of her parents who lived miles away and how they would worry if they knew she had left. But she had no choice. Staying meant more nights filled with fear, more moments of despair. Moving forward, even into the unknown, felt like freedom. Hours passed, or maybe only minutes. It was impossible to tell in the storm. Clara's strength began to fade. Every breath was a struggle, and her fingers and toes felt like they belonged to someone else. She tried to keep moving, telling herself that the road had to be near, that someone would see her, that she would be safe soon. But the snow fell harder, and the cold pressed against her chest like a heavy weight. She slipped, falling face first into the snow. She scrambled up, coughing, and realized she had lost track of the path entirely. Panic rose in her chest. Clara sank to her knees in the snow, shivering uncontrollably. She hugged herself, trying to keep warm, and tried to calm her racing heart. "I can't give up," she whispered, her words barely audible over the storm. But the cold was winning, and her body felt weaker with every passing moment. She realized she had to find shelter soon, or she would not survive the night. Her thoughts turned to anyone who might be out in the storm: neighbors, travelers, even the local preacher who was always known to help those in need. If anyone could help her, it would be someone like him. Far across town, Reverend Samuel Hayes had been busy checking on his parishioners. He had always made it his mission to care for everyone in Pinecrest, and tonight was no different. Even with the storm raging outside, he couldn't stay inside and ignore the people who might need him. He had packed a small bag with blankets, hot tea, and supplies, and was making his way from house to house, carefully navigating the slippery roads. The wind whipped his coat around, and snow stuck to his boots, but he didn't slow down. He had heard that someone might be in trouble tonight, and he intended to find them before it was too late. Meanwhile, Clara forced herself to stand, her body shaking from the cold. She saw a faint light in the distance, flickering behind the thick curtain of snow. Hope sparked in her heart. Maybe someone was there. She started moving toward it, her steps slow and careful. Her legs ached, but the thought of warmth and safety kept her going. The wind tried to push her back, but she refused to let it. Every step forward was a small victory, a sign that she could survive. Samuel, meanwhile, had seen a faint trail of footprints in the snow. He recognized the pattern immediately, someone small moving through the storm, desperate to escape. He followed the trail, calling out softly, "Hello, are you there?" His voice was steady and calm, cutting through the roar of the wind. He moved carefully, knowing that anyone lost in this storm could easily collapse from exhaustion or cold. The footprints led him deeper into the woods, where the snow was even thicker. He kept moving, determined to reach the person before it was too late. Clara stumbled again, falling into a drift of snow. She tried to pull herself up, but her hands were numb and her strength was almost gone. Tears mixed with the falling snow on her cheeks. "Please," she whispered into the storm, "someone help me." Her voice was small and fragile, almost swallowed by the wind, but it carried her desperation. She thought she would never make it out alive. The cold was overwhelming, her mind foggy and her vision blurred. She felt the edges of consciousness slipping away. Just as Clara began to lose hope, a strong, warm hand touched her shoulder. She gasped and looked up, squinting through the snow. Standing before her was a man in a long coat with kind eyes and a steady presence. "It's okay," he said gently. "You're going to be fine, I've got you." Samuel lifted her carefully from the snow, supporting her weak body as he guided her through the storm. Clara clung to him, her relief mingling with lingering fear. She had never felt such immediate safety, such an unspoken promise of protection. Step by step, they moved through the blizzard. Samuel's calm voice reassured her, giving her courage to keep going. The snow fell heavily, but she felt a warmth she hadn't felt in years, not just from the coat around her, but from the presence of someone who genuinely cared. For the first time in a long while, Clara felt hope. She realized that she might survive this night, and maybe, just maybe, a new life awaited her beyond the storm. Hours later, they finally reached Samuel's cabin, a small but sturdy building that looked inviting even in the storm. He helped her inside, wrapped her in thick blankets, and offered her hot tea. Clara felt the warmth seep into her frozen body, melting the fear and numbness a little at a time. She shivered, exhausted but alive, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to relax. She was safe. She was not alone, and she had survived the blizzard. Clara sat wrapped tightly in a thick blanket, her body still shivering from the cold. The cabin smelled of pine wood and burning logs, warm and comforting. For the first time in hours, or maybe days, she felt her muscles relax, though the fear and exhaustion still clung to her. Samuel sat nearby, quietly stirring a small pot of tea over the fire. He didn't rush her or ask questions right away. Instead, he focused on creating warmth and comfort, giving her space to recover. "Here," he said gently, handing her a steaming cup. Clara accepted it with trembling hands, grateful for the warmth seeping into her fingers. She sipped carefully, the hot liquid soothing her dry throat and numbing the ache in her chest. Samuel watched her with kind, steady eyes, never pressuring her, simply present. In that moment, Clara realized that kindness could feel like a lifeline in a world that had been so cruel to her. After a few minutes, Samuel spoke again, his voice calm and gentle. "You're safe now. You don't have to worry about the storm or anyone else tonight." Clara nodded, swallowing hard. She didn't trust herself to speak just yet. Words felt heavy, and the memory of the fear she had just escaped pressed against her mind. But even in her silence, she could feel Samuel's quiet strength and patience. The cabin was small but cozy. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting flickering shadows on the walls. Samuel had prepared a simple bed with thick blankets and extra pillows for her. "You should rest," he said. "You've been through a lot. Tomorrow we can figure out what comes next." Clara hesitated, feeling a mixture of relief and uncertainty. She had never been treated with such care before. People had always demanded things from her, judged her, or ignored her suffering. But Samuel, he simply wanted her to be safe. As she lay down, she couldn't stop thinking about the storm outside. The wind had not relented, and snow was still piling high against the cabin walls. She imagined the town, empty streets buried under ice, and people trapped inside their homes. She felt a flicker of gratitude that Samuel had been willing to leave the warmth of his own home to help her. He had risked himself to save someone he didn't even know. That thought brought tears to her eyes, tears of relief, of exhaustion, and a deep, overwhelming sense of gratitude. Samuel brought over another blanket and gently tucked it around her shoulders. "You'll be warm now," he said softly. Clara nodded, unable to speak at first. She felt too weak, but her eyes met his, and in that simple gaze she felt a safety she had never known before. For hours they sat in quiet companionship. The storm outside raged, but inside the cabin there was peace. She sipped more tea, letting it fill her with warmth, and Samuel simply kept the fire going, humming softly to himself, a sound that seemed to steady the storm outside and inside her heart. Eventually, Clara found her voice. Why did you help me?" she asked, her words barely more than a whisper. Samuel looked at her, surprised by the question, but answered kindly. "Because everyone deserves to be safe," he said simply. "No one should be out there alone in the cold, especially not when they're afraid. I couldn't just leave you." Clara felt a lump in her throat. She had never met someone who cared so much for another person's safety without asking for anything in return. I didn't know anyone could care like that," she said, her voice shaky. Samuel smiled gently, shaking his head. "People can surprise you," he said. "Sometimes it takes a storm to show us the good in the world." Clara couldn't help but smile faintly. There was something comforting in his words, something that felt like hope she hadn't felt in a long time. She took a deep breath and tried to let go of some of the fear that had weighed her down for so long. The night passed slowly, with the storm still howling outside, but inside the cabin, Clara began to relax. Samuel checked on her occasionally, bringing extra blankets, a warm meal, and more tea. Each gesture was small but meaningful. Clara found herself opening up a little, telling him about her home, her life, and the fear that had driven her into the storm. She spoke slowly, cautiously, unsure if she could fully trust anyone. Samuel listened without interrupting, without judging, simply allowing her to speak. "You're incredibly strong," he said after she told part of her story. "It takes courage to survive a night like that, to leave behind fear, even when you don't know what comes next." Clara felt her cheeks warm. She had never considered herself strong. Strength had always seemed like something other people had, not her. But hearing it from Samuel, someone she didn't even know yesterday, made her believe that maybe she could survive and even rebuild her life. Hours turned into morning, and the storm finally began to ease. The snow outside glistened in the weak light of dawn. Clara peeked through the window and felt a flicker of hope. The world seemed peaceful, fresh, and clean, as if the storm had washed away not only the snow but also some of the fear that had filled her life. Samuel was preparing a small breakfast of bread, eggs, and tea. The smell filled the cabin, making her stomach growl despite the nervous energy still lingering in her chest. As they ate, Samuel gently asked, "Have you thought about where you want to go next?" Clara hesitated. The thought of leaving her old life behind felt both terrifying and liberating. She knew she couldn't return to the fear and tension of her home, but she didn't know how to start over. Samuel's calm presence gave her courage to consider the possibilities. I don't know," she admitted. "I've never had a choice before." Samuel nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Then we'll figure it out together, one step at a time." Over the next few days, Clara began to regain her strength. Samuel helped her clean up, change into dry clothes, and even mend some of the small cuts and bruises she had received during the storm. He never rushed her, never forced her to explain anything she wasn't ready to share. Instead, he encouraged her to take her time, to trust the process, and most importantly, to trust herself. Slowly, Clara began to feel safe again. For the first time in years, she could breathe without fear. During those days, Clara also discovered something about Samuel. He wasn't just kind, he was patient, wise, and gentle. He had a way of listening that made her feel like her words mattered, like her life mattered. He shared stories from his own life, from the town, and from his faith, but he never preached at her. He simply shared, and in doing so, helped her understand that life could be gentle and good, even after hardship. One evening, after a day of clearing snow and repairing the cabin roof, they sat together by the fire. Clara looked at Samuel and realized she felt something unfamiliar. It wasn't just gratitude, it was warmth, comfort, and even admiration. She had trusted him with her life, and he had never failed her. She felt safe enough to laugh at a small joke he made, and she realized that for the first time in years, she could imagine a life without fear, a life where someone cared for her simply because she mattered. Samuel noticed the change in Clara, though he didn't comment immediately. Instead, he continued his routine of caring for her, giving her space, and allowing her to heal at her own pace. He understood that trust couldn't be rushed, that kindness had to be steady and consistent. Clara began to feel that maybe she could survive the past, confront her fears, and embrace a new beginning. And all of it was because of one man's courage, one man's willingness to risk himself to help someone in need. By the end of the week, Clara could walk without stumbling, her body no longer trembling from the cold. She had eaten well, rested, and even begun to talk more openly about her past and her fears. Samuel had become more than just a rescuer. He had become a guide, a friend, and a source of hope. Clara realized that in the midst of the storm, she had found someone she could trust, someone who reminded her that life could still hold goodness, safety, and love. The storm was gone, leaving Pinecrest covered in sparkling snow, bright under the morning sun. Clara looked out the window and felt a mixture of gratitude and wonder. She had escaped the fear of her past, survived the blizzard, and found someone who had shown her what true kindness looked like. For the first time in a long while, she felt ready to take the next steps in her life, knowing that she didn't have to face them alone. Clara woke up that morning feeling a little stronger. The warmth from the fire and the comfort of Samuel's cabin had started to chase away the exhaustion she had felt for days. She stretched slowly, her muscles still stiff, but her mind was clearer. For the first time in a long while, she felt safe enough to think about her life, not just the fear that had controlled it. Samuel was already awake, kneeling by the hearth and adding more wood to the fire. He looked up and smiled gently when he saw her stirring. "Good morning," he said. "Did you sleep well?" Clara nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Better than I have in a long time," she admitted. Samuel nodded as if he understood exactly what she meant. He had a way of listening without judgment, making her feel like it was okay to share even the smallest truths about herself. Breakfast was simple: warm bread, scrambled eggs, and tea. They ate quietly, the soft crackle of the fire filling the space between them. Clara felt a strange sense of peace. She had survived the storm, and now she was safe. For the first time, she didn't have to hide or pretend. Samuel's calm presence made it easier to breathe, easier to feel human again after so much fear. After breakfast, Samuel suggested they take a short walk outside. The storm had passed, leaving the snow bright and sparkling in the morning sun. The air was crisp and cold, but it felt fresh and clean. Clara hesitated at first, worried about being seen or recognized, but Samuel's gentle encouragement gave her courage. She wrapped her coat tightly around her and stepped outside. The world was quiet except for the crunch of snow under their boots. As they walked, Clara began to open up a little more. She told Samuel about her home, about the fear she had lived with for years, and about the loneliness that had made her feel trapped. Samuel listened patiently, nodding and offering quiet words of comfort when she faltered. He never interrupted or rushed her, allowing her to share as much or as little as she wanted. Each word she spoke was like a small step toward healing, and she felt a little lighter with every sentence. "You've been through so much," Samuel said softly, his eyes kind. "But you're here now, you're safe, and you don't have to face your past alone anymore." Clara looked at him, her eyes filling with tears. She had never heard words like that before, never from anyone who didn't expect something in return. She felt an unfamiliar warmth in her chest, a mixture of gratitude and trust. For the first time, she could imagine a future without fear. Back at the cabin, Samuel helped Clara with small tasks, like mending her wet clothes and preparing warm drinks. He treated her with respect and patience, never making her feel rushed or pressured. Clara found herself laughing quietly at some of his stories about life in the town, stories of small adventures, kind neighbors, and the occasional snowstorm mishap. The laughter felt strange but wonderful, a sign that she was beginning to heal. As the days passed, Clara's body grew stronger, but her heart still carried the weight of her past. Samuel noticed this and suggested small steps to help her regain confidence. He encouraged her to walk around the town, to meet a few kind neighbors, and to try simple chores she had avoided for years. Each day was a small victory, a chance for Clara to remember that she was capable and strong. One afternoon, as they walked through the snow-covered streets, a neighbor waved from a distance. Samuel introduced Clara, and she felt a flicker of nervousness. But the neighbor smiled warmly, offering a friendly greeting and a small basket of food. Clara felt a sense of belonging she had never known. It was the first time in years that someone had greeted her without fear, anger, or judgment. Samuel squeezed her hand lightly, a silent message of encouragement, and she felt a small spark of hope. Back at the cabin, they sat by the fire, and Clara began to talk about her dreams, something she had not thought about in years. She spoke quietly, almost in wonder, about wanting a life free from fear, about traveling someday, and about helping others who had faced hardship. Samuel listened, nodding and smiling, gently encouraging her to believe that these dreams were possible. "You've survived the storm," he said, "and storms make people stronger. You can do more than you think." Clara felt a mix of emotions, fear, hope, and a growing admiration for Samuel. He had not only saved her from the blizzard, but he had also given her a sense of hope and purpose. She realized that trust, once broken, could be rebuilt, and that kindness could change a life in ways she had never imagined. She found herself thinking about him often, about the way he had cared for her, about the warmth of his voice and the gentleness of his touch. One evening, after a long day of helping clear paths in the snow and organizing supplies, Clara sat by the fire and reflected on her journey. She had survived fear, survived the storm, and now she was beginning to survive herself. Samuel was nearby, quietly reading, but he looked up and noticed her thoughtful expression. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. Clara hesitated, then spoke softly. "About everything, about how different life can be when someone cares." Samuel nodded. "Yes," he said simply. "It can change everything." Over the next few days, Clara continued to grow more confident. She started helping Samuel with chores around the cabin, learning small skills like chopping wood, preparing meals, and organizing supplies. Each task gave her a sense of accomplishment, and she began to feel capable again. Samuel was patient, guiding her with gentle instructions and words of encouragement. He never rushed her, never made her feel inadequate, simply allowed her to rebuild herself at her own pace. As Clara healed emotionally, she also began to share more about her fears and experiences. She told Samuel about the nights she had spent alone, the arguments, and the loneliness that had made her feel trapped. He listened quietly, offering comfort without judgment, simply acknowledging her pain and validating her feelings. Clara realized that being heard was a powerful thing, and that healing could begin when someone truly listened. One afternoon, they sat together near the window, watching the snow glisten in the sunlight. Clara felt a sense of peace she had not known in years. "I feel lighter," she said quietly, "like I can breathe again." Samuel smiled, his eyes full of warmth. "That's because you are safe now," he said, "and you're taking steps toward a life you deserve." Clara nodded, feeling a mixture of gratitude and awe. She had never imagined that she could feel this way again, that hope could return after so much fear. As the days turned into weeks, Clara's bond with Samuel grew stronger. She began to trust him not only as a protector, but also as a friend, someone who genuinely cared for her well-being. They shared stories, laughter, and quiet moments of reflection. Clara realized that she was not alone anymore, that she had someone who would stand by her through challenges and guide her toward a better life. One evening, as the sun set and the sky turned shades of orange and pink, Clara felt a sense of clarity. She had survived the blizzard, survived fear, and now she was ready to face the future. Samuel sat beside her, quiet and steady, offering silent support. Clara knew that the journey ahead would not be without challenges, but with Samuel by her side, she felt brave enough to take the first steps toward a new beginning. That night, as Clara drifted off to sleep, she felt a sense of gratitude and hope. The storm had tested her, but it had also led her to safety and kindness. Samuel had shown her that trust could be rebuilt, that life could be gentle and good, and that even after the harshest storms, a new chapter could begin. Clara closed her eyes, feeling warmth and peace, ready to embrace whatever the future held. The days were growing longer, and the snow that had buried Pinecrest for weeks was slowly melting, revealing the outlines of the town beneath a blanket of sparkling white. The sun shone brighter now, and the air smelled fresh and crisp. For Clara, each new day felt like a small miracle. She had survived the storm, survived the fear that had haunted her, and now she was learning to live again. Every morning she woke up with a little more courage, a little more hope, and a growing sense that life could be gentle and good. Clara and Samuel had fallen into a comfortable rhythm. Mornings were spent tending the cabin, chopping wood, preparing meals, or repairing things that the storm had damaged. Afternoons often included walks through the snow-tinged forest or along the streets of Pinecrest, where neighbors had begun to recognize Clara's presence and offer small gestures of friendship. Samuel never pushed her, never forced her to talk to anyone, but his quiet encouragement gave her the confidence to interact with the world beyond the cabin. One morning, as they walked along the edge of the frozen creek, Clara paused to watch the water flow under a thin layer of ice. The sound of it rushing over rocks and under snow was soothing. Samuel stood beside her, his coat dusted with snow and his breath visible in the cold air. Clara felt a strange calmness in his presence, a feeling that nothing could harm her while he was near. She had begun to rely on his steady presence, not just for safety but for emotional support as well. "I never thought life could feel this peaceful," Clara admitted softly, her gaze fixed on the creek. "For so long, I only knew fear, worry, and running. Now I feel like I can breathe again." Samuel smiled gently. "That's because you're allowing yourself to feel safe," he said. "It's not easy, but it's the first step to living fully. Fear has power only when you let it control you. And you've already shown incredible courage by surviving and taking steps toward a new life." Clara felt warmth in her chest, a mix of admiration and gratitude. For the first time, she felt proud of herself, proud of her own strength. As the days passed, Clara realized that her feelings toward Samuel were changing. What had begun as gratitude and trust had blossomed into something deeper, something tender. She noticed the kindness in his voice, the gentleness in his actions, and the way he always listened without judgment. Every small gesture, from offering her a warm cup of tea to supporting her while walking through the snow, had made her heart swell with affection. Clara began to wonder if it was possible to care so deeply for someone she had only known for a few weeks. One evening, after a long day of clearing snow and repairing parts of the cabin, they sat together by the fire. The room was warm, the glow of the fire reflecting on the walls, and the wind had finally quieted outside. Clara felt a strange mixture of nervousness and hope. She had spent so many years hiding her emotions, suppressing any sign of vulnerability, but now she felt safe enough to let herself feel. Samuel noticed her quiet expression and asked, "What's on your mind?" Clara hesitated, unsure how to express the feelings growing inside her. I don't know how to say this," she admitted softly, "but I feel something I haven't felt in a long time, safe, cared for, and maybe more than that." Samuel's eyes softened and he reached out, gently placing a hand on hers. "Clara," he said quietly, "it's okay to feel what you feel. You've been through so much, and it's natural to recognize the people who help you heal. You don't need to be afraid of your own heart." Clara looked down at their joined hands, feeling a rush of emotions, relief, hope, and an unfamiliar excitement. She realized that she had been longing for this connection for years, even if she hadn't known it. Samuel's steady presence had shown her that love could exist without fear, that trust could be rebuilt, and that life could be gentle again. She took a deep breath, feeling both nervous and certain, and looked up at him. I think I'm beginning to care for you," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Samuel smiled warmly. "And I care for you too, Clara," he replied. "Not just because I rescued you, but because of who you are. Your courage, your kindness, and your willingness to embrace life again inspire me every day." Clara felt tears prick her eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of hope, and of a joy she had not known in years. The days that followed were filled with quiet moments of connection. Clara and Samuel shared laughter, stories, and simple companionship. They worked side by side, prepared meals together, and took walks through the town and forests. Each shared moment strengthened the bond between them, creating a foundation of trust, respect, and affection. Clara felt her heart opening in ways she had thought impossible. She realized that she could imagine a life with Samuel, a life where fear no longer controlled her and where love could flourish. One afternoon, they were walking along a snow-covered trail near the edge of the forest. The sun was low in the sky, casting long golden shadows on the snow. Clara felt a sudden rush of emotion, a mix of gratitude, admiration, and something deeper she hadn't yet named. She looked at Samuel, who was walking a few steps ahead, and without thinking, she called his name. "Samuel." He turned immediately, his eyes meeting hers. There was a warmth in that gaze, a quiet understanding that made Clara's heart race. She realized in that moment that saying his name felt different than ever before. It wasn't just gratitude or respect, it was a recognition of love, trust, and connection. Samuel smiled softly, walking closer and taking her hand gently in his. "Clara," he said, his voice steady and full of emotion, "I feel the same." In that simple exchange, something shifted between them. The years of fear, pain, and uncertainty that Clara had carried began to lift, replaced by the knowledge that she was loved and safe. Samuel's presence, his unwavering kindness, and his gentle heart had opened her own heart in ways she hadn't thought possible. They stood together in the fading sunlight, holding hands and feeling the warmth of each other's presence, even in the cold of winter. As the days turned into weeks, Clara and Samuel began to talk about the future. They discussed the life they could build together, one rooted in trust, respect, and mutual care. Clara felt excitement and hope as she imagined a world beyond fear, a world where she could live freely, learn, and grow. Samuel listened to her dreams and offered his support, promising to stand by her as she stepped into this new chapter. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned shades of pink and orange, Clara looked at Samuel with a quiet determination. "I want to start over," she said softly. "I want to leave the fear behind and embrace life again with you." Samuel smiled, gently taking her hand. "And I want that too, Clara," he replied. "We'll face the future together, step by step, with patience, love, and courage." Clara felt a surge of emotion, a mixture of relief, gratitude, and joy. She had survived the storm, survived fear, and now she was ready to embrace love and hope. Samuel's steady presence had shown her that life could be gentle, that trust could be rebuilt, and that even after the darkest storms, a new chapter could begin. Together, they stood, hand in hand, ready to face whatever came next, knowing that they were no longer alone. The bond between Clara and Samuel deepened every day. Their relationship was built on trust, patience, and the shared experience of surviving a harsh winter storm. Each moment together reinforced the knowledge that they had found something rare and precious, a love that grew out of courage, kindness, and mutual respect. Clara felt her heart opening more with each passing day, and she realized that the storm, while terrifying, had led her to safety, hope, and love. In those quiet moments by the fire, during long walks through the snowy woods, and through shared laughter and conversation, Clara discovered that life could be filled with warmth, trust, and connection. She felt a profound sense of gratitude towards Samuel, not just for saving her from the blizzard, but for showing her the power of patience, care, and understanding. She began to believe that she could have a life free from fear, a life where love was possible, and a life where she could finally thrive. As the snow melted and spring approached, Clara realized that the hardest parts of her journey had taught her the most important lessons. Courage, resilience, trust, and love were all intertwined, and she had found them in the most unexpected way. With Samuel by her side, she knew that she could face the world, embrace her dreams, and live a life filled with hope and joy. In that moment, Clara understood that the storm had not just tested her. It had guided her to the person who would stand beside her, through every season of life, offering love, safety, and unwavering support. Spring was arriving in Pinecrest, and the snow that had covered the town for months was finally melting, revealing the green shoots of grass and buds on trees. The streets, once empty and quiet under heavy snow, were now slowly filling with life. Neighbors began emerging from their homes, clearing paths and exchanging greetings. For Clara, the changing season felt symbolic. Just as the town was waking from the long, harsh winter, she too felt herself waking into a new life, a life filled with hope, trust, and love. Clara had spent the weeks after the storm regaining her strength and independence. She had learned to trust herself again, to walk confidently through the town, and to engage with the world around her. Samuel had been by her side through every step, offering guidance, patience, and quiet encouragement. Each day spent with him reinforced her belief that life could be gentle, that love could be earned through kindness and respect, and that courage came from taking small steps forward, even after trauma. One bright morning, Clara awoke to birdsong outside her window and sunlight spilling across the cabin floor. She stretched and glanced over at Samuel, who was reading quietly by the fire. A small smile spread across her face. Life had changed so dramatically in the past few weeks. The fear and uncertainty she had carried for years felt distant now, replaced by a growing sense of belonging and purpose. Samuel looked up at her smile and returned it warmly. "Good morning," he said softly. "Sleep well," Clara nodded, her heart feeling lighter than it had in years. After breakfast, they stepped outside together. The air was crisp and fresh, filled with the scent of melting snow and budding flowers. Clara inhaled deeply, feeling the freedom of the open air and the warmth of the sun on her face. For the first time in a long while, she felt truly alive. Samuel walked beside her, his steady presence grounding her as they moved through the familiar paths of the town. People waved and greeted them warmly. Clara noticed that she was no longer afraid of recognition or judgment. She smiled and waved back, a small but significant sign of her growing confidence. As they walked, Clara felt a mix of emotions, gratitude, hope, and a deep affection for Samuel. She had come to rely on him not just for safety, but for emotional support, friendship, and a quiet strength that inspired her. Samuel, in turn, had grown to care deeply for Clara, admiring her courage, her resilience, and her willingness to embrace life again. Their relationship was built on trust, patience, and mutual respect, and it had grown steadily into something strong and meaningful. Returning to the cabin, Clara suggested they prepare a small celebration to mark her new beginning. Samuel agreed, and together they cleaned, cooked, and arranged flowers they had gathered from the melting snow. The cabin felt alive with warmth, laughter, and anticipation. Clara realized that this moment, simple as it was, symbolized everything she had been working toward: safety, independence, trust, and love. It was her first conscious step toward embracing a full life, free from fear. That evening, after the celebration, Clara and Samuel sat together by the fire. The room was filled with the soft glow of flames, the scent of flowers, and the quiet hum of contentment. Clara's heart felt full, and she knew that the time had come to express the feelings that had been growing inside her. She turned to Samuel, her eyes meeting his steady gaze. "Samuel," she said softly, I want to thank you. Not just for saving me during the storm, but for showing me that life can be good again, that people can care, and that I can trust and love again." Samuel reached for her hand, holding it gently in his own. "Clara," he said quietly, "you don't need to thank me. I only did what anyone with a kind heart would do. But I am grateful too, grateful for your trust, your courage, and your willingness to open your heart again." Clara felt tears prick her eyes, not from sadness, but from overwhelming emotion. She had survived so much, and now she felt the joy of connection, the warmth of love, and the hope of a new beginning. Days passed, and the bond between Clara and Samuel continued to deepen. They shared simple joys, preparing meals together, taking long walks through the budding forest, visiting neighbors, and laughing at small, everyday moments. Each day strengthened their relationship, and Clara felt a profound sense of gratitude. She knew that she had not only survived the blizzard and her past fear, but she had also found a companion whose presence made life brighter, safer, and more meaningful. One afternoon, as the sun cast golden light over the cabin and fields, Samuel took Clara's hands in his own. "Clara," he said softly, "these past weeks have shown me something important. Life is fragile, but it can also be beautiful, and I don't want to spend another day without you by my side. Will you marry me?" Clara's heart leapt. She had never expected such a question so soon, yet it felt natural, inevitable, and full of hope. She looked into Samuel's eyes, seeing the kindness, patience, and love reflected there, and she knew the answer in her heart. "Yes," she said, her voice steady and full of emotion. "Yes, Samuel, I will marry you." In that moment, a wave of joy and relief washed over both of them. They embraced, feeling the warmth of their connection and the promise of a shared future. The past months of fear, struggle, and uncertainty were behind them, replaced by love, trust, and hope. They had survived the storm together, both literally and emotionally, and now they were ready to face life as partners, supporting each other through every challenge and joy. The days leading up to their wedding were filled with preparation, laughter, and quiet reflection. They invited a few close neighbors and friends from the town, people who had witnessed Samuel's courage during the storm and Clara's resilience in rebuilding her life. The cabin and surrounding area were decorated simply, with flowers, ribbons, and the fresh beauty of spring. Clara felt a deep sense of joy, knowing that her community supported her and celebrated this new beginning. On the morning of the wedding, the sun shone brightly, casting a warm glow over Pinecrest. Clara wore a simple but elegant dress, her hair softly curled, and her heart full of anticipation. Samuel stood nearby, calm and smiling, his eyes reflecting the same mix of hope, love, and joy that Clara felt. The ceremony was intimate, filled with heartfelt words, laughter, and tears of happiness. When Clara repeated Samuel's name in her vows, it carried the weight of trust, gratitude, and love. Samuel echoed the sentiment, promising to stand by her through every season of life. After the ceremony, the couple stepped outside into the gentle spring breeze. The snow had mostly melted, leaving patches of green and tiny flowers peeking through. Friends and neighbors congratulated them, sharing warm smiles, gifts, and wishes for a bright future. Clara and Samuel walked hand in hand, their hearts light and full, feeling the promise of life's possibilities ahead. They had survived fear, hardship, and storms, both literal and emotional, and they had emerged stronger together. In the weeks and months that followed, Clara and Samuel built a life filled with love, trust, and purpose. They worked together in the town, helping neighbors, supporting those in need, and sharing their story as a reminder that courage, kindness, and hope could overcome even the harshest challenges. Clara discovered her own strength, resilience, and capacity for love, while Samuel continued to be a source of guidance, patience, and unwavering support. Looking back, Clara realized that the storm had been more than a test of survival. It had been a turning point, a moment that had led her to safety, trust, and love. Samuel's courage had saved her life, but his kindness, patience, and understanding had healed her heart. Together, they had transformed fear into hope, loneliness into companionship, and struggle into a shared journey of growth and joy. As the sun set over Pinecrest one quiet evening, Clara and Samuel sat together on the cabin porch, holding hands and watching the colors of the sky shift from gold to pink to deep blue. Clara leaned against Samuel's shoulder, feeling warmth, love, and a sense of peace she had never known before. "We've come so far," she whispered. Samuel nodded, squeezing her hand gently. "Yes," he said softly, "and the best part is we're just beginning." In that moment, surrounded by the quiet beauty of spring and the promise of a shared future, Clara felt a profound sense of gratitude. She had survived fear, survived the storm, and found love, trust, and hope along the way. Life was no longer something to endure. It was something to embrace. And with Samuel by her side, she knew that every challenge, every joy, and every moment of life would be shared with someone who truly cared. Together, they had weathered the harshest storm and emerged into a life filled with light, love, and endless possibility.